All right, I'm going to go over how to solder, and then I'm going to show you how to make like a small lamp. One of the things you're going to want is a soldering iron. What I like to use is this Weller. I would just stick with like kind of a name brand, like the ones with no name on it. I'm always a little nervous about because it is basically something that gets really hot, and if it was to have a short in it, someplace it could cause a fire. So I would avoid like the inexpensive ones from like a dollar store. I have used some in a pinch when I was someplace where I needed one more for soldering electronic stuff, and just had to go pick one up, and it worked okay. But I would say the cost of a name brand one like a Weller is definitely worth your peace of mind. I would say they're between $20 and $30 at like a Home Depot. Okay. Another thing that you're going to need is you're going to need flux of some type. This is one kind of flux right here that I like to use. Let me get used to where the camera is. And they sell this like at the Home Depot, at Ace, and so forth. There's a lot of different kinds. This is the kind I happen to like. It's called No Corrode. Okay. Regular paste flux, but there are other kinds. All right. The other thing that you're going to want is you're going to want some solder. And that I find now, it used to be Radio Shack was the best place to get it. Since Radio Shack has more or less only an online presence now, you can just get it through like Amazon, like Radio Shack sells on Amazon, or Radio Shack directly online. And I like the thinnest solder you can get. And really, you can only get silver bearing solder this size anymore. You won't get any lead solder. So at this point, any of the solder will be like this, where it says silver bearing solder. Okay. So once you have those things, you're good to go. So what I usually do is if I'm making something square, like what I'm going to do right now is show you, like if this is a piece of drafting, doesn't really matter what it is, but let's say you wanted to put a piece here and solder a piece there. Okay, what I've done is I'm using some twin tack, which is basically like double stick tape. Okay, and what you're going to want to do is take, and you will need some pliers, but you probably already have pliers for this, you know, some sort of cutting pliers. Like you probably had those since beginning class. So you're going to want to cut your wire, okay, and then place it here. For example, that's why I'm using the double stick tape or twin tack as a way to hold it 90, and then I can put the other. And usually what I want to do is make sure that it's nice and flush. Remember how this only part of it cuts flush, okay, and the other side doesn't. So cut that flush, and then what I'm going to do is put it here on this red line, okay? So now it goes on the red line like that, and I'm going to solder it right there. So you're going to take your flux, which is super easy to use. Okay, you can use like I am a Q-tip, or you can use like a piece of wood or something. Put it right there, all right? Okay, and then you want to take your solder, and when you're doing something this small, a lot of times it will almost self-solder, okay? One thing is check your tip. That tip kind of needs to be tinned again, which basically means get it hot, and sometimes put it like on a sponge, a little bit of a sponge or something, and then essentially get some of this on it, okay? Sometimes put a little bit of the flux directly on your tip, and you can see, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's shinier now. You know, it's a little dark in this, you know, so it's hard to tell. But when it's shiny, it will take some of this on it, okay? And once you kind of get a little bit of it, you can literally just solder this directly onto here, just like that. There. And then you can see it takes like just a second to heat up, or I'm sorry, well, it does just take a second to heat up when it's that small, and it only takes like a couple seconds for it to dry. Let me see if you can tell. Now, it still looks black, but it's actually shiny at the tip. Now, here's the thing. Once you've let it kind of dry like this, and let's say you made a whole grid. I'm just doing one little piece, but we'll say this is a whole grid or something. I would say do all of it first and then decide to take it off, because that's where it's going to get a little bit tricky. Okay. And what I do is usually take and use a knife to go through and peel it up. And then look, this right here, and it's a little, I'm looking through the camera, so it's a little hard for me to tell. But you can see just that tiny little bit of solder, you know, will keep this together. See? And then, you know, obviously if it's a thicker piece, the thicker the piece, the longer it takes to heat up, and the longer it takes to solder. Okay? The other thing is you can't really solder something too close to this, otherwise we'll desolder it. Like, you know, you might have the next one. So think about that when you're designing something, if it's got a lot of solder joints right close to each other. But that's really about it for soldering. Again, you'll need brass wire. Copper, brass is a little bit easier. You're going to want some flux, and there's all different kinds. The one I happen to use right here, okay? All right, this one, no corrode. That's like the idea of no corrode. Is the kind I like most, but there's other kinds. I would say buy a couple different, like, you know, as you use one, if you kind of like it, buy a different one. They last for a long time and they're not that expensive. Okay. Solder. Again, I like to buy the thinnest possible because it melts fast, and we're generally soldering small bits. You will almost always just find silver bearing solder. Okay. All right. You don't want lead solder. It's unhealthy. It's not as strong. Okay. So you don't want lead solder. And it's hard to find anyway. Soldering iron. Okay. Right here. You know, I like a Weller. You want your soldering iron to be like 45 watts. Okay. Otherwise it won't melt. And then some of the twin tack, like this is the kind that's basically like a sheet of double stick tape, is really handy for keeping things down. It's the equivalent of like if this was getting welded in the scene shop and they nailed it down with blocks. All right, the next video is on how to make a small lamp.